Weapons used in World War II. Imagine making a weapon so deadly that it's regarded as being too deadly for use in war. As Fosdick said, war's tragedy is that it uses man's best to do man's worst. War brings out humanity's devastating capacity for technological innovation. The urgent survival stakes of World War II accelerated this process beyond belief, birthing in mere years advancements destined to influence conflicts for decades. Let's examine some terrifying weapons unleashed between 1939 and 1945 that shocked both the Axis and Allied forces in their ruthless carnage across bloodstained battlefields worldwide. World War II rapidly transitioned from infantry charges into panzer thrusts, finally morphing into full industrial slaughter with civilians the ultimate targets. All pretense of gentlemanly combat endowing some prospect of survival through heroic action vanished against explosive, armored, and automatic onslaughts, wiping out entire cities over months. Both sides dispensed with moral constraints against mass killing of non-combat personnel, whether through starvation sieges, intentional famines, firebomb air attacks, concentration camp machinery, or outright death squad village massacres. Ethnic cleansing emerged a norm rather than scandalous aberration during history's most catastrophic conflict. Hundreds of millions faced erasure or subjugation between merciless imperial tyrannies, fixated on controlling Eurasia's natural resources and industrial potential. Maximum extraction and production goals mattered above all humanistic concerns for Axis and Allies alike in this struggle over totalitarian living space expansion without defined limits. Kamikaze Divine Wind. By 1944, Imperial Japan was losing territory to American onslaughts across the Pacific. Its once triumphant navy found itself outproduced in ships, planes, and pilots. Gripped with fury over surrendering precious islands and sustaining its empire, Japan unleashed a new aerial weapon that struck primal fear in US sailors, the kamikaze. These suicide planes initially comprised young Japanese student recruits willingly flying lightly armored explosive-packed aircraft straight towards high-value Allied vessels without expectation of survival. Their mere presence seeded immense dread through the US fleet. Though such suicidal devotion seems alien today, it fits with Japan's ancient samurai Bushido code, where surrender brought utter warrior disgrace and ritual suicide restored lost honor. Some kamikaze drank ceremonial sake or sang patriotic songs right before specified missions, from which they would never return alive. Their newly manufactured Kyofu Divine Wind fighters even glided further with extra fuel tanks to maximize psychological intimidation against ships without aerial protection hundreds of miles out at sea. Against seasoned US naval gunners, the kamikaze threat was dire since traditional air defense tactics like flat curtain barrages or roving interceptor patrols proved ineffective. Fanatical pilots easily avoided anti-aircraft artillery fire right until initiating their final terminal attack plunge, pre-armed with armor-piercing bombs on naked perpendicular attack vectors nowhere simulated during pilot training exercises. Hundreds of floating steel shipborne airstrips hosting thousands of sailors soon faced terrifying routine stealth bombardments, from kamikazes emerging suddenly from the clouds to strike without warning. By the battle's end, merely 345 kamikaze pilots had successfully terminated their lives by intentionally crashing into US vessels, damaging 368 ships while completely destroying 34 boats and killing almost 5,000 sailors. During the US invasion of Okinawa alone, 7 complete kamikaze squadrons utterly wiped themselves out, attacking the Fifth Fleet. The Divine Wind left sailors struggling psychologically with the demoralizing revelation that selective suicide bombers can self-annihilate against full crews of vastly superior military forces, yet still manage to inflict widespread suffering and strategic damage. This 5-fold casualty rate increase against already grisly conventional attack losses seeded immense trauma and dread amidst isolated soldiers far out to sea, facing no choice but to remain stationed against aerial assassins pledged suicidally from Japanese home islands, never to surrender until smashing every trace of American seagoing troops' capabilities through blockade all the way across the Pacific. One can scarcely imagine a more terrifying weapon than aerial fanatics giving their lives to plunge straight into thousands of defenseless crewmen stranded on vessels lacking options for escape or concealment. The kamikazes demonstrate how, even in the most lopsided wars, innovative tactics premised on psychological dominance rather than conventional tactical logic can reorder battle dynamics. The V-1 Buzz Bomb. The Nazis earned distinction for birthing both cruise missiles and ballistic missiles during history's most catastrophic global war. Cruise missiles offer a pilotless flying bomb capability to precisely strike targets hundreds of miles away without intercept. Ballistic rockets accelerating through outer space plunge catastrophically with complete surprise onto urban targets, delivering nuclear or massive conventional explosives with minimal advance warning from anywhere on the planet. These systems comprise the backbone of the Cold War-era mutually assured destruction strategy, because no defense can stop either missile family reliably. Hitler first unleashed the V-1 Buzz Bomb as his Vergeltungswaffe 1, Vengeance Weapon 1. Serving as Germany's pioneering modern cruise missile after seeing extensive and relentless action against England in 1944. Launched by the thousands from fortified bunker installations in Holland and France from beyond the range of Allied counterstrikes or observation flights, the V-1 pulsed jet-powered drone could hit London civilian population targets 150 miles inland at 400-mile-per-hour speeds resembling early fighter planes. 10,000 of these so-called flying firebombs targeted southern England, specifically intending to dehouse factory families critical for supplying the Allied continent bomber campaign against Germany itself. V-1 missiles proved impossible to intercept for outdated Allied piston fighters and anti-aircraft artillery once reaching cruising altitude en route to England. Their familiar pulsating Argus pulse jet engine groaning, labeled by terrified Londoners as buzzing alien insects, signified to panicked civilians that 5 tons of explosives were now racing downwards to their last unstoppable terminal descent onto random targets, destroying entire blocks at a time. Over 10,000 civilians perished under this prelude blitz, urging swift British countermeasures such as arming allies with high-performance jet interceptors to bring down the V-1s through air combat and deception tactics, redirecting missiles already airborne off deadly, accurate strike paths onto open fields. The V-1 campaign against England demonstrated Nazi technological supremacy in pioneering remote drone missiles targeting cities hundreds of miles deep in enemy terrain, which remained completely invulnerable against the defenses of the period, but nonetheless constrained the likelihood of Nazi victory. These early accomplishments still influence modern global missile arsenals greatly today, as advanced variants stand ready to unleash megaton-class thermonuclear blasts, eliminating major command centers, naval ports, and air bases in surprise decapitation assaults within critical early hours of any World War III scenario breaking unexpectedly today. Shoe mine. Landmines terrify ground forces to this day for their invisible omnipresence, bringing abrupt, random death. Whether marching or riding into combat, soldiers never escape nagging doubts that their next footsteps may trigger these concealed subterranean terrors. Germany pioneered many mine warfare tactics in World War II for slowing enemy offensives through paranoia and piecemeal mutilation. However, material shortages led Nazi engineers to design completely wooden shoe mines undetectable by standard minesweeping methods. Shoe mines took devious simplicity to new lows, comprising mere wooden boxes with explosives and basic chemical trigger detonators buried just under the soil surface. Though small, their ghastly effectiveness seeded chaos through Allied ranks already under relentless German machine gun and artillery fire throughout Europe's bocage terrain. The slightest pressure triggered explosions, which could blow off entire limbs if not kill them outright. Soon, troops dared not venture anywhere off roads for fear of what might lurk beneath grass and bushes. Nazi defenders capitalized on this hesitation to further canalize attackers into interlocking fields of enfilade fire. The shoe demonstrated psychological corrosion amongst otherwise unbreakable armies through persistent threats of sudden dismemberment or death against troops already advancing into heavy defensive barrages. Modern armies may possess ultimate battlefield leverage, yet still remain vulnerable to myriad localized attacks that sap team initiative or willingness to press ahead. Poison gas. World War I unleashed history's first widespread battlefield use of chemical weapons like mustard and chlorine gas. These agonizing bone-burning substances left men choking to death through blistered, ruptured lungs, or stumbling around ragged and eyeless, blinded by their own liquefied organs after contamination. International horror temporarily stigmatized poison gas's further employment for a generation, until Axis fascists again unleashed industrialized chemical death against wartime foes and genocide victims when expedient. Nazi German companies eagerly manufactured thousands of tons of advanced nerve agents like tabun and sarin gases for chemical warfare, despite Hitler's hesitations about deploying them against allies on the Western fronts. These organophosphate compounds kill through paralysis and bodily twitching, leading to convulsive suffocation as the lungs turn to jelly. Only the slightest skin contact brings extremely painful death. Nazis found more immediate usage against Holocaust death camp victims tortured by Zyklon B gas released from shower room vents, guaranteeing agonizing deaths when breathed. Japan's infamous Unit 731 researched even deadlier biological weapons on Chinese civilian populations to spread bubonic plague, anthrax, cholera, dysentery, and other gruesome diseases through entire villages. Hundreds of thousands perished horrifically from Japanese germ bomb releases, showcasing the abandonment of fundamental humanity during modern warfare's nadir. Poison gas brings ghastly demise to soldiers and civilians alike, regardless of age or combatant status, in ways that magnify suffering beyond measure. All major powers in World War II explored biological and chemical weapons for erasing human life with ruthless efficiency without regard for ethical norms or treaty conventions. Our continued modern reliance on instruments of uncapped totalitarian violence ensures that whole societies remain perpetually vulnerable against leaders willing to employ fundamentally immoral means when attaining their political ends. Conclusion. This concludes our overview of but a few of the myriad fiendish killing devices developed through desperation and casual cruelty when wartime survival hung daily in balance. We see how unrestrained warfare impels competing empires down moral slide slopes into technological abysses, from which humanity may never fully emerge unscathed.